Okay, there have been some significant updates following Sunday's protest inside a church in St. Paul where the pastor works for ICE. Two journalists, Don Lemon and Georgia Fort, and a group of protesters, including local attorney and Reverend Nikema Levy Armstrong, entered into the church and engaged in what I thought was a brilliant act of nonviolent, disruptive, direct action. I think we need more Christians to call out and confront other professing Christians, members of the clergy, who are profiting off of human suffering. I thought it was fucking brilliant. I also knew that the regime was going to retaliate, right? Because we can't stand up and exercise our rights under a would-be authoritarian state and expect that the state is going to tolerate that, right? They're trying to chill dissent. They will try to make an example out of everybody. And when we see successful, innovative protest in a way that is disruptive, does have an impact, draws huge attention to what's happening, the injustice, the contradiction, that you have people who are professing Christians, people who are pastors, who are working for ICE, like they're not going to tolerate that, right? They're going to try and make an example out of everybody who is there. So I anticipated that there were going to be charges and arrests, and that's what we saw early in the week. I know a lot of people were freaking out about it because we knew that Kristi Noem was going to vilify the people who engaged in this protest. We knew she was going to lie through her teeth because every time her lips are moving, what's she doing? Besides trying to draw attention to all of the filler in her bottom lip, she's fucking lying. I believe she called the demonstrators agitators and said that they were intimidating and threatening the worshipers. And then Pam Bondi dredged up this old anti-KKK law, I think, to charge the folks who were there. And I want to be really clear. I think that they knew that this was likely to happen. When we engage in acts of civil disobedience like this, we have to be prepared to get charged. You have to be prepared. You have to willingly take those risks, consent to those risks. Understand that at this point in the game, there's no way to secure our liberty without sacrifice, without tremendous risk. So when Reverend Armstrong and the group of, I should mention it wasn't just Armstrong. There was also William Kelly, who is an anti-ICE protester, who is also a United States veteran. When they were charged, I believe the charge is conspiracy to deny rights, right? They had to go digging to find some reason, some justification for this charge. I think a lot of people were freaked out, especially when they announced that Don Lemon was being charged. And if you look in the charging documents, they also initially charged journalist Georgia Fort as well. And then later on, her name was taken out. But people were freaking out because they're charging journalists for doing their job. This is protected under freedom of the press. They are allowed to be there. And the regime doesn't give a shit about constitutional rights. They don't give a shit. They want to dismantle the First Amendment. So it is our job to vigorously defend our rights. And that is what Don did in court. And earlier today, a judge said, absolutely not. These charges are being dropped. Nice try, Pam. Lemon's lawyer made a statement, should the Department of Justice continue with a stunning and troubling effort to silence and punish a journalist doing his job, Don will call out their latest attack on the rule of law and fight any charges vigorously and thoroughly in court. And before I get into what's happening to the other activists and what our view of this entire case should be, I think it's important to remember that as we look to the United States civil rights movement, so many of the instances that you saw of civil disobedience were done on purpose, expecting there to be charges so that there could be the process of unjust laws or the illegal actions of the government, the oppressive actions of the government being litigated in the courts. So acting like if we see protesters being charged, that's big and scary, right? Please understand that well thought out direct action, civil disobedience, as modeled for us, as crafted for us by folks in the civil rights movement, includes being arrested and charged on purpose so that process can work through the courts. That's how you get laws changed. It's also how you bring tremendous public pressure to bear to the issue. Think about when cases get litigated, they're in the news all of the time. And please understand that is the level of sacrifice that not only folks made during the civil rights era, but folks are having to choose to make in 2026 America. People understand that they are going to go to jail and maybe go to prison. People understand that they're likely to have criminal records, and they're saying, I'm willing to stand up against unjust laws. I'm willing to stand up against the tyranny of the government. I accept what happens. We cannot let those sacrifices be in vain. We must help use them to further the cause to secure our liberty and to get free of the tyranny of Donald Trump. Now, Pam Bondi tried to bring 2 different charges against Armstrong, and the judge earlier today struck through one of those charges by hand and wrote no probable cause next to it. Armstrong and Allen were both granted release by the judge. But of course, the government appealed that release order. Part of what happens under an authoritarian state with the weaponization of the Justice Department is absolutely they're seeking retribution. Absolutely they're trying to chill dissent. And so they will go like balls to the wall. They will be as aggressive as possible. In fact, Allen's attorney earlier today said, "I've never seen anything like this before." And Armstrong's attorney said, "These are officials making political decisions and purposely making a political spectacle and a political circus out of the court system for their own purposes." That is exactly what's happening. That's what happens when a dictator has an extreme loyalist in the form of Pam Bondi who will abdicate her oath and corrupt the Justice Department in order to prosecute Trump's political opponents, anybody who supports democracy. I think it's important that we continue to keep this story in the headlines. We talk about how extreme and unjust the charges are against Armstrong and Allen, and that we talk about how Pam Bondi tried to charge 2 journalists and the judge immediately threw the charges out. But I think we also need to discuss what actually happened at that church on Sunday. I was not surprised to learn after this event that church is actually a church plant of Desiring God. Desiring God, founded by John Piper. If you're an ex-Calvinist, you know what I'm talking about. 0% surprised to see a conservative church of the Reformed tradition supporting ICE and the Trump regime. They lost the plot a long fucking time ago, right? But to me, I find it a little bit weird, right? I understand like sheep and the goats, right? The Pharisees don't think that they are Pharisees, right? The goats think that they're the sheep. But as an ex-Calvinist, as an ex-Presbyterian, we always really took a lot of pride in our intellectual prowess, in our tremendous knowledge of Scripture. So to see a congregation support these charges, first of all, to see them support ICE, to see them support the terror being inflicted by Donald Trump, to see anything that Donald Trump is doing, I don't understand how any self-proclaimed Christian who understands their Bible could support anything that Donald Trump is doing. But that's a whole other conversation. Christian friends that I've lost down the alt-right pipeline who are deep in the cult of MAGA. Like, did they forget their entire Bible? Yeah. For me, when I saw Armstrong and the other protesters in that church, I thought 2 things. 1, how Christ-like of her. How Christ-like of all of them. Because Matthew 21:12-13 is Jesus going into the temple and flipping over the tables of the money changers and the pigeon sellers. Right? I'll just read it. "And Jesus entered the temple of God and drove out all who sold and bought in the temple, and he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. He said to them, 'It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of robbers.'" Armstrong and the other protesters were going in and flipping tables. They were modeling Jesus's behavior. And the second thing I thought was the absolute hypocrisy after these charges came out, the outrage from MAGA Christians who were like, these are agitators who are coming in and depriving us of our right to worship, right? Like that's the claim, is that these protesters prevented these Christians from exercising their religious right to worship. And I was like, how many people has ICE abducted from inside churches, from church parking lots, from church property? People are afraid to go to church and worship because ICE will abduct them. The Catholic Church had to give a special dispensation to Catholic immigrants to say, like, it's okay if you can't come take communion, if you can't come do confession, or you can't come to Mass, because we know that ICE is trying to abduct you. So we're going to let you like get a pass, right? Like, aren't we supposed to know that you're Christians by your love? Tell me what's loving and Christ-like about abducting families, children on their way to church. What's loving and Christian about anything that MAGA does? Jesus would be in there flipping the tables every fucking Sunday. So I commend these protesters and I look forward to their exoneration. It's a good time for everybody to remember that jury nullification is a thing.